Hello. Mid-May 2025. Still here, still on Mother Earth, watching the planets as they appear to travel around us, reflecting back what's going on Mother Earth. A year of huge transitional change for all of us. We've been experiencing great change and turmoil since the pandemic, actually through the pandemic, and it has seemingly gotten a lot crazier since. The outer planets all changing signs is so unusual to be taking place in the same period. We're going into a new time, a time with a new perspective of reality. Saturn is the planet that symbolizes what's real. It's the planet of realism. Neptune is the planet of idealism, of hope, of illusion, of spirituality. It's the planet of music and of art, the planet of medicine. Neptune symbolizes many things, illusion, and it dissolves what it touches. So Saturn and Neptune are conjunct, starting at the end of May and continuing through 2 months this summer, actually right through till September. Then we see a retrograde motion, and both Saturn and Neptune retrograde back into Pisces. They re-enter Aries in February of 2026. So Saturn moving into Aries at the end of May, this is large. We haven't seen that much evidence yet of Neptune being in Aries. It moved in at the end of March, but we'll see far more evidence of this as time goes on this summer, and especially now that the two are conjunct. The last time Saturn went into Aries was 1996. Saturn is restriction and limitations. It blocks things. Saturn is rules and regulations. And when Saturn went into Aries the last time in 1996, there were wars ongoing on the planet, as there usually are, and they stopped. Saturn brings the end. It restricts the actions that are Aries in nature when Saturn travels into Aries. Just like when Saturn traveled into Aquarius, December 2020, we saw restriction of our freedoms because of the COVID virus. And Saturn symbolizes restriction, and Aquarius symbolizes our freedoms, amongst other things. Then Saturn shifted into Pisces. And for the last 2.5 years, we've had Saturn transiting through Pisces. Pisces symbolizing hope and optimism. And the planet, the people here, we have had less and less hope, less and less optimism for many people on the planet as Saturn has been traveling through Pisces. Moving into Aries, what will we see? Aries things will become blocked, restricted. They will acquire rules and regulation and great focus on these things. So we saw the end of the Croatian War, the Bosnian War, and the war in Guatemala, the Civil War, in 1996. We also saw the president at that time, Bill Clinton, signing a nuclear test ban treaty. Will Donald Trump, on this pass of Saturn through Aries, be involved in signing test ban treaties with the nuclear world, with Iran, for example? Possible, probable. Aries is weaponry and war. And when Saturn is in Aries, guns and weaponry tend to have restrictions and rules and regulations placed on them. And it certainly affects the ongoing wars at the time. So we can be hopeful. Hopeful for Ukraine-Russian war coming to an end finally at the end of May, early June. So Saturn in Aries. Big changes in Aries things. We'll see them restricted. What else is Aries? Aries is competitiveness. And competitive business practices are going to become more and more restricted after the end of May with the tariffs, which of course are just taxes being placed on businesses so excessively by Donald Trump. Saturn in Aries blocking competitive business practices, blocking war, and weaponry. This is a positive thing, we can hope. Now, Saturn and Neptune conjunction. This is an extremely rare and different and unusual energy because of the differences between the two planets. And they're both sitting side by side in conjunction in those beginning degrees of Aries, which symbolize the beginning of life. The first degrees of the zodiac. 0 degrees in February 2026, as they both enter together, will be the final culmination of this energy, but we'll experience it as it's in effect all this summer and again next February. The last time Saturn and Neptune came together in a conjunction, they weren't in Aries, they were in the sign Capricorn. And that was in 1989. And the Berlin Wall came down. The Berlin Wall was a huge obstruction that we all experienced on this planet from the time it was built in the 60s by Russia to keep the people in and not let them leave the eastern part of Germany and Russia itself. That wall, that restrictive wall, restrictive to freedom, that was so much a part of the Cold War, was pulled down, brought down physically by a great many people in Germany in the month of November in 1989, and I do remember that very well. It was inspiring for the world to see that wall come down, and it was the end of the Cold War at that time. So maybe we can be hopeful again that this war in the Ukraine-Russian area will come to an end. This has happened before when Saturn was conjunct Neptune, like it will be again. Neptune hasn't been in Aries for many, many years. Saturn in Aries has a 30-year cycle. Saturn conjunct Neptune has a 6-year cycle. But Neptune in Aries hasn't happened for 163 years. And the last time that Neptune entered Aries, Saturn was also very close to Aries. We saw the beginnings of the war, the Civil War in the United States at that time. Out of that suffering, that time of extreme challenge and suffering for people, the Red Cross was born, an agency focused on healing and helping those less fortunate. There were many agencies formed at that time whose focus was on those less fortunate in healing and helping these people. So we're looking at more and more socialism coming into society after extreme suffering and war being experienced by the population. This is how Neptune conjunct Saturn manifested the last time. In Aries. What will happen this time? Well, Neptune is the ocean, it's the seas, it's water itself. In Aries, the sign of fighting, but also conjunct Saturn, the planet of rules and regulations. We're going to see rules and regulations put in place regarding water, presumably. Who owns the water? Who owns the sea? Who owns the ocean? Regulations, rules, shortages of water possibly, the lowering possibly of the sea levels. This is all very probable, drawing our attention as a collective group of people while Neptune's traveling through Aries and conjunct Saturn. Pharmaceuticals, addictions, these will be addressed and focused on in a very large way as well with this Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Rules and regulations trying to be applied to these, and the focus will be on these. One of the main things and themes we see if we look at history is that the time periods when Saturn and Neptune were conjunct, the old order starts to dissolve and starts to break down. And with both of these planets in the sign Aries, which is so rare, taking place at the same time Pluto's entering Aquarius and Uranus is entering Gemini, It's a time where we see the beginning of the end, where the old order starts to break down. Religions, monarchies, dictatorships, the old patriarchal way of ruling and dictating, these are going to become stronger and stronger until the world experiences such suffering and challenge that there's a revolution and a rebellion, and equality becomes the focus. Socialism coming into the way we govern and approach life as a collective group of society. So it's a time of endings and beginnings in human history, a very transitional, shifting time. One of the things that gives us hope during this time period is that Pluto is sextiling Neptune. It's sextiling Saturn, a 60-degree angle between Pluto and Neptune and Saturn. And Uranus is also sextiling these two planets, Neptune and Saturn, during this next 3-year period. Pluto trines Uranus, Uranus sextiles Neptune and Saturn, and Pluto sextiles Neptune and Saturn. This would reflect a huge shift in humanity towards more spiritualism, more spirit in our world and consciousness of it, and more consciousness of the need for equality, for more love, for more peace. During the 60s, Pluto and Uranus were conjunct, and they were both sextiling Neptune through those years of the 60s. When we saw a tremendous focus on suffering with the Vietnam War, with so much suffering that time period, and a focus developed with the larger group of people through that period of protest and revolution against the concept of war, disagreeing with the government's decisions that brought so much suffering into the world of the ordinary people. So it became a time where people were focused on peace and love. Remember? I remember very well. Groups of people. This is when the men grew their hair long as a revolutionary statement against the status quo. At that time, the status quo was ordering them to go to war and kill Vietnam people, Vietnamese people for no good reason, just to destroy communism. A fanatical approach. Something good came out of it, a shift towards more equality. But it started with protest, and it started with a great deal of suffering. And we may see a great deal of suffering during this period where Saturn is in Aries, Neptune is in Aries, and they are conjunct. Yet good things in terms of wars stopping, restrictions on weaponry, and consciousness developing towards equality, and the need for this more and more in our society is a big part of this transitional time period that we find ourselves in. So while Uranus is still in Taurus, and that's going to be from now until early July, and then again it returns to Taurus, it enters Gemini in July, and returns to Taurus from November of this year until May of next year. And while Uranus is still in Taurus at the very last degrees, there's very high risk of volcanoes being active and earthquakes, land movements and shiftings, and great changes and shiftings, some dramatically restrictive, disruptive in the world's finances. This is extremely probable during this time period, with Uranus still in Taurus as Saturn and Neptune move into Aries. What's also very interesting, if we look at Donald Trump's chart and where Neptune and Saturn, this conjunction of energy, is traveling. It's traveling in one house, some house, for all of us. Your second house, third, fourth, fifth, the things of the house that Saturn and Neptune are traveling through and that they're going to be conjunct in for each of us. The things of that house will get a great deal of attention in our lives. And for Donald Trump, it's the 8th house. 8th house things are drawing his attention in a great big way, and will be so even more. Saturn entered the 8th house for him in January, just as he became the president. The 8th house is other people's money, other countries' money, other countries' resources. It is war, it is death and birth and war. It's secret things and other people's money. This is what he will be focused on. We're looking at tariffs, we're looking at taxes, we're looking at shifting and changing perspectives that he will try to put into place through this whole period this next year and part of the year next year, 2026. So where are Saturn and Neptune traveling in your chart? Take note. Where do you have Aries in your chart? We'll see a great deal of attention on the things of that house in your personal life. But collectively, we are at a time of great transition from leaving behind the old ways of perceiving of things to a whole new way of living on the planet that's far more spiritual and far more equality based. Eventually, slow change with the outer planets. They move very slow. Take care.